Hello once again from the Prim Reaper. I'm going to take a tiny break from covering the APA guidelines to do a video on another subject. You'll have to excuse me for half the month I spent preparing for and writing the notoriously difficult examination for the Professional Practice in Psychology, or EPPP. 48% pass rate in my province for the year 2022. Yikes. Thankfully, I did successfully pass, but as you can imagine, it takes a lot out of a person to have to go through something like that, so I'm giving myself a nice little treat and writing this video on a fluff piece because I always find it fun to tear down this nonsense. The article is titled, "What Influences My Grooming Habits? Personal Choice or the Patriarchy?" I just love the smell of silly feminist nonsense in the morning, don't you? Or maybe that's cow dung. Well, you know what they say, same shit, different pile. As a comic journalist who has most of her work posted online, it's pretty easy to find pieces I wrote years ago that I don't totally agree with anymore. I've grown as an artist and a person, and these articles stick around to remind me that change is possible, inevitable even. In particular, this piece on body hair I wrote for the Lily in 2018. Geez, not even through the first paragraph and already we have a divergence. I'm sure you can guess exactly what that one is about, but just briefly for relevant context, let's look at a few of the panels and passages from that article as well. Growing up, I didn't know any women who had all their body hair. It would take years of razor burn and feminist texts before I was comfortable with my own. Why do I have to shave? Hair is ugly. Who says? I would just like to pause here and go back one slide. See if you notice anything about the individual that is demonstrating the removal of hair. I present to you, ladies and gentlemen, the patriarchy. We can finally put a face to the villain. And I'm betting it's not what any of you would have expected. This is like the cheesy murder mystery trope of the butler did it. Secretly, it was cliquey 15-year-old girls all along. Oh no. Now, as I watch my 3 nieces growing up, I can't bear the thought of them hating their bodies or feeling like they need to change. Mild humorous aside, when I first saw this panel, I thought those very small hearts were flies. Probably not the best design choice. Oops. But I wax my eyebrows, see? And that's fine too. I like to shave my legs because I love how smooth it feels. If I can teach them anything, I hope it's this. Do what makes you feel good. Be kind to people who make different choices. Okay, with these last 2 panels, we were coming to something resembling an appropriate point. If you want to do something to your body because you like the way it feels or looks on you, great! That should be the primary defining reason why anyone does anything to their own bodies. I will note some significant caveats, however. With regard to body odor and the way one elects to control that, with the full spectrum from uncontrolled stank to maximum strength harsh chemical perfume, is something that directly impacts other people, and so you shouldn't expect to be able to just get away with having everyone around you at best plugging their noses in distaste, and at worst struggling to properly breathe. I feel like this should be obvious, but unfortunately to many people it isn't. And speaking of things that belong in the probably should be obvious camp, the second caveat I would like to mention is that you are allowed to want to do anything you want with your own bodies. Again, that doesn't directly negatively impact other people, but other people are not obligated to find that attractive. If you are on a love thy whole self kick and feel like going absolutely full Sasquatch, and you wind up on a date with a partner, man or woman, mind you, who is ultimately dismayed to discover that you've elected for carpet rather than hardwood floor, they have committed absolutely zero crime if they decide they're not interested anymore. Assuming, of course, they have brought up their preferences to you and you have established you have no desire to capitulate to their evil patriarchal demands. Anyway, that's a good segue to return to the original article and continue on. Upon rereading, it's clear how much I struggle with the idea of my nieces growing up in a world that demands that they change their bodies. I left them with this: do what makes you feel good, and be kind to those who make different choices. But now I'm recognizing the flaws in that message, that it in fact requires a lot of self-examination, starting with one important question: why are we making these choices in the first place? Yes. In true social constructivist fashion, we must recognize the problems that come from a message that focuses on things within one's control. Because if things are within our control, then that means we have to put on our big girl panties and be responsible for our own choices, and we can't have that now, can we? As I land solidly in my mid-30s, I'm trying to practice deeper self-evaluations when making choices or judgments about my body. I shave 'cause I like it, right? But it's tricky when our decisions are influenced by something larger than personal preference. I want to stress something important here. You are never, ever going to live a life free of the influences of the outside world. As much as some people like to think that they are an island that can never be controlled by things like the expectations of others, or advertisements, or any other means of influence, it just isn't the case. Regarding the latter, for example, even going out and downloading an ad blocker is technically being influenced by advertisements in a way, but barring such pedantic arguments, I'm sure all of you can think of one or two advertisements in your life that you have found amusing or otherwise attention-grabbing, whether or not you then went out and purchased the product afterwards. But perhaps a good example of the former is simply the approach to body hair. How is the judgy feminist, I'm not going to conform to your patriarchal standards body hair growing crowd any less of a conformist beauty norm than the supposedly unanimous patriarchal no body hair crowd? If you shave or don't shave your body hair with either of these two groups in mind, either way, you are still not being true to your own preferences. Here are some examples of wanting to shave or not shave that are based on personal preferences. I don't want to shave because I don't feel like spending the extra money on razors. I don't want to shave because I nicked myself with a razor once and bled so much that I traumatized myself. I like to shave because I can sit there and rub my soft legs all day. I like to shave because it feels gross to mash underarm deodorant into a huge bushel of hair. I shave or don't shave based on whether I have time or if I think of it, and I don't really put too much concern into it one way or the other. Are any of these perspectives influenced by outside choices? Well, possibly, but that's not the primary reason behind these choices being made. That's the key difference. And when you're not making decisions based on your legitimate personal preferences, you wind up seeing neurotic responses like the following. For instance, when it comes to body hair, I've always liked the way smooth legs feel, but I also can't deny that uncomfortable feeling that creeps up when I'm rocking a stubble and shorts combo in public. Is everyone looking at me? First of all, note that exactly 0 of these people are looking at the protagonist here. Second, this is a well-known psychological phenomenon called the imaginary audience that is typically a product of adolescent egocentrism that causes people to believe that everyone cares a whole lot more about them and their personal choices than they actually do. Typically, people outgrow this in late adolescence or early adulthood as people begin to realize that others are way too busy with their own lives to give half a rat's ass about yours. And they also recognize that they themselves don't typically notice much the fashion choices of every other schmuck they encounter on the street, so the reverse is probably true as well. But hey, maybe this gal is a late bloomer. Why do these feelings of shame persist even after all these mental exercises of trying to be at peace with my body? Surprise! It's capitalism, hand in hand with the patriarchy. Of course it is. Before I tear into this one, let's read the next panel first. We've been socialized to perform and uphold a European standard of beauty upon which women are judged. Those who perform well are rewarded. Now, regarding the ubiquitous patriarchy capitalism argument, I would like to perform a simple thought experiment. Have a look at these two men. Tell me, do any thoughts come to mind about these individuals based on their appearance alone? You might think the man on the right is sloppy, shabby, undiscerning, unobservant, unconfident as his hands are in his pockets, to name just a few examples. All of these and potentially more thoughts may spring to mind easily, despite the fact that both of these men might have paid the exact same amount for these suits. Heck, the one on the right might have even paid more by virtue of purchasing a suit with obviously much more material than the one on the left. Let's try another one. Look at these two men and think about your first impression of them. That first lizard-brained initial gut reaction. Many people will find that they automatically ascribe more positive traits like intelligence or assumption of skill to completely unrelated traits like one's physical appearance. Never mind the fact that this fellow might be an accomplished astrophysicist, while this fellow might be a drug-addicted high school dropout. It doesn't make a lick of difference to that initial unconscious bias many people will have in the milliseconds after seeing them. I use these two examples to highlight the fact that the belief that this is a phenomenon that happens exclusively to women is self-centered and naive. It's just a fact of life that those who are more attractive tend, on average, to see a lot of additional perks and benefits. This isn't some patriarchal capitalist conspiracy. It is a very basic biological and psychological phenomenon. It's hardly exclusive to European standards either, so there goes that theory. I mean, for Pete's sake, trying to stand out and be more attractive to prospective mates in some way or another is a common trait across species. Some things just do be like that. Skipping ahead a bit for time purposes. Being attractive is not enough. It is doing attractiveness appropriately that gets rewarded in the workplace. Jacqueline S. Wong, co-author of Gender and the Returns to Attractiveness. Wong's study in 2016 found that attractive individuals earn roughly 20% more than people of average attractiveness. The data also suggested the benefit can be improved by grooming. So I looked at this study referenced here and found a few interesting notes. From the abstract. Further, while both conventional wisdom and previous research suggests the importance of attractiveness might vary by gender, we find no gender differences in the attractiveness gradient. However, we do find that grooming accounts for the entire attractiveness premium for women, and only half of the premium for men. When we look at the charts presented in the study, we do see that the relative difference in grooming for men across the 3 levels of attractiveness is relatively stable, but I think the more interesting data is in the women. You do see a more strongly negative impact for poorly groomed, unattractive, and average women, but I think it's intriguing that the well-groomed, unattractive women are in fact the best earners of all women, and by a decent-sized margin at that. It's hardly the conclusive proof that attractiveness yields a bigger paycheck. If anything, I would say that this information should be seen as empowering for those who feel they are unattractive to see that this perception can be ameliorated with proper grooming. Again, something that is within one's own control. Gosh, it's funny how much I come back to that theme, huh? Darndest thing. Skipping ahead again. For me, I've started examining my grooming purchases and what I hope to achieve with them. Another mental trick is comparing my experience to my cis male husband's. How do you feel about your pores today? I have them? Ugh, this is so stupidly condescending on multiple levels. First, I love the highlighting of your husband as a cis male, like that is in any way necessary except to minimize the experiences of his own self-perception. Also, suffice it to say, I think that if you went to most people and asked them a question like, "How do you feel about your pores today?" they would give you the same confused response. If you spend that much time poring over yourself in the mirror, pun definitely intended, that's on you. Maybe take a moment and think on whether it's a productive use of your time to be so entirely self-absorbed instead of trying to rope others into your self-confidence issues, Our experiences and privilege are variable. We don't all have access to the same methods of resistance and advocacy. Give me your money. Give me your time. I'm good, thanks. But what we can all do is question the systems we participate in and what they ask of us. So, I don't know what methods of resistance and advocacy she's referring to here. We don't all have access to not purchasing or using various beauty products? I don't know. Also, I love the use of the word resistance there, like she's fighting some great war in the world. I feel like folks with this kind of self-important attitude always like to ascribe some higher meaning to such mundanities as electing not to shave your body hair any longer. When people say resistance, they're not typically referring to the texture of your legs as you run your hands along them. And if your idea of advocacy in the world is simply choosing not to buy a bottle of body lotion, I'd encourage you to get some perspective on what real suffering looks like in the world and reassess your priorities. See, if this person had just come to the conclusion on her own that she didn't really feel like spending any time and money on her own self-grooming, I would have respected that a whole lot more than all the navel-gazing about the patriarchy and thinking that anyone else gives a crap about some random woman's fuzzy drumsticks. Because quite honestly, with all the talk about patriarchy and capitalism rewarding beautiful women, it just comes across as sour grapes. Sorry if I sound a little extra sassy in this video. I really get my dander up when I see people like this thinking they're sticking it to the man for choosing to issue personal hygiene practices as though literally anyone else cares. Especially when she initially had a message I could get behind back in 2018, to do what makes you happy and to respect others' choices. In terms of this article in specific, if it's advocacy you're wanting to do, there are so many more important things you could be spending your mental energy on. However, if all you want to do is focus on your own reflection, then just call a spade and stop acting like you're Rosa Parks. Lastly, you might notice that I put a little extra effort into my own appearance today. I would make a joke and say that I did it because I wanted to resist this author's resistance, but nah, I just felt like being a little fancy today, and I don't think that wearing or not wearing a little eyeliner constitutes a political statement. Neat, huh? Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.